Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Nur,
My name is Nur.
and together we are light-hearted
Dads.
And back to the question that you mentioned, which is, how do you talk about it to your kids? I really don't have an answer, but I know I have had the conversations with my children already.
How did that
Yeah.
look?
So all of this was based on, when you understand, when you start talking to them about history, when you start talking to them about politics, there's like a journey that your child goes on. Yeah. And so I've had those discussions a lot, especially when you talk about, for example, issues around the ummah. So when you talk about things around the ummah, then they're quite clear. So when you talk about the issues, say, for example, Israel and Palestine. Yeah. When you're talking about the issues in Syria or even Afghanistan right now and other places, you understand it. And especially after, for example, and more so recently when in the last few years you had ISIS going around just doing everything nutty as possible. Yeah. It's just so in the forefront. Kids are talking about it at school. It's on the news and they see the news. And so they ask questions, what is all of this about? And so they become quite a perfect time to then also kind of segue in about Islamophobia, that there's a heightened fear of Muslims. And it's something which has been produced and manufactured by the politicians, by the government, by the media industry to stoke up fear and it's of otherism. And if you link it back to history, it's quite easy to say. You could talk about how before, after, if, for example, you could talk about Nazi Germany. Good prime example. What did Hitler do? He otherized the Jews. Yeah, he made them the scapegoat, and they made them, the basically evil, and depicted them in such a way that people disgusted them, and he made it easier to basically do genocide. Yeah, he made it easier. People accepted it. And then you go through a history, and then the Cold War started after World War II. And through the whole Cold War, within the Western nations, it was all about, careful, is your neighbor a red? Is he a communist? Kids, they'll tell kids, check out, is your parents a communist? If they are, rat them. Yeah, call them up. And you had the whole thing that happened in FBI and J. Edgar Hoover, was going around and the whole rounding up of, people who are precisely communist. And the world has always worked in this way, especially within the Western nations, about otherizing. There has to be someone who's a scapegoat. The moment the fall of Russia happened, boom, 90s came in. What happened straight away? Muslims, terrorism, boom, boom, boom. They started pushing up. Obviously, 9/11 propelled it even further, but we're not saying before 9/11 it didn't exist. It existed. I remember the 90s clearly. And it became further and more worse. So all of these are very much linked. Politics, religion, history, all of those things. So a lot of them have come back up in natural discourse. And some of them has come about in conversation that I've had about my personal experiences. Yeah. So then it's just about, you know what it is? It's a very fine balance because you don't want to knock your kids' aspirations. I always say this, you can be whatever you want to be if you put your mind to it. And you persevere, and we always say what? It's also by the will of Allah. Yeah. So we all have to always put that in because it's not the case of I am everything myself. Allah is the one who gave you everything. So we always have to ground ourselves like that. But you say you could do whatever you want to do. You could be whatever you want to be. Just put the effort in, have the goal and drive for it.
So just build that in their head.
Yeah, have that. But then, because I don't want you to have a conversation and not literally just take the legs out from underneath them. You don't want to do that. No. They have to have hope. They have to have that. Then you have to talk about some realism. That society, this exists. So there may be cases that you have to work double hard to get something. There may be cases, all of those things, and it's not fair. You're going to feel it's not fair. We know it's not fair. But then what we do is, one is that you persevere. The other one is that you actually, if it's clear and apparent, we should report it. Why should we face this abuse? So if it's not happening, report it. Whatever means there are. If it's in employment and you think that something really was there, then report it through the systems. If you face Islamophobia on the streets, for example, report in the system. And then lastly is that you basically be real about the situation. And with that means put tawakkul on Allah. That sometimes there might be a job you're going for and you didn't get it. And it was down to these factors. But in the end as well is also the fact that it wasn't destined for you. It wasn't written within your qadr and all of those things. So then you also mentioned those things and they're important. Now obviously I had to have this chat a bit more with my daughter. The moment she's going out and she's traveling by herself, so she goes to secondary school, she's obviously visibly Muslim, she got wearing hijab. And when she travels home by herself from school, then there are chances and occasions where she could face it. So benefit we have is, okay, we're in Tower Hamlets, we're in East London, everywhere. So inshallah, we'll hope that the chances of it are lower. But you're talking about those who are viewers and listeners. You might be living in many different places, and it's a natural fear that you have. So then you have to think, okay, how do you equip them without putting fear in them? Because you don't want it to be the case where we're so afraid to go out the house because we're going to get faced Islamophobia. So it's a very, very fine line. I don't have the perfect answer, but I can say these are the stuff that I have done with my children to kind of prepare them for the real world. That, look, you're going to face this. It's the reality of life, unfortunately. It's not fair.